Alright, so welcome back, and this is going to be part 2 of the Akai GX-620 reel-to-reel we were working on a few weeks back. And if you didn't see part 1, just a quick summary. Basically, this unit belongs to Franz. He lives in Florida, and his problem started when he was going to replace the front panel incandescent lamps with LEDs, and in the process of that, something happened and turned out to have a systems control issue where the unit is stuck in pause and won't come out. So he sent it up here to me, and I traced that back in part 1 to the key controller IC, which turns out to be a pretty impossible part to get stateside anyway, but we did find one in China, so we're going to go ahead and get that installed today. And also I did order up replacement incandescent lamps, so we're going to replace those all back with incandescents and see if we can get this one back up and going and get it returned to him. As for our intro music this week, we're checking out the 2015 album by Jeff Tate. He was recording under the name Operation Mindcrime at this point. He had lost his lawsuit bid against the other founding members of Queensryche. They retained the name Queensryche, and he just started recording under Operation Mindcrime. But I did catch his album, The Key, did catch my attention for the song Burn, and so we're going to check out a little bit of this, and then we'll pick back up on the Akai over here. All right, let's come back in real quick and just have a look at the parts that we received for this. The first thing that I had ordered was these 24-volt incandescent lamps for the front panel buttons. He only needs 5 of these, but I ordered some extra ones for my stock just in case there would be a need for these in the future. I got these from bulbtown.com, and they're a great source for these old incandescent lamps. They seem to have quite a few of them. And then we get to the infamous key controller IC. And let's see if the camera will cooperate here and we can get a fix on the part number. It's a Mitsubishi number, M54410P. You'll notice I ordered 3 of these. The reason for that is in case I have a defective one, I've got 2 more chances at it, and to make sure we get a good one. In the event the first one we put in is okay, then I'll have a couple for stock. I don't anticipate ever needing one again, but if I do, I certainly don't want to wait another month to get one. So hopefully these will serve us well. And that IC goes in here. And of course, I have his unit, in case you couldn't tell, it's flipped upside down so I can get to the component side of this board. And that IC is located right there. And we'll need to go ahead and get that one out, and I'll get the other one put in, and then I'll pick back up with you. Basically, this board is held in place, a few screws. We're going to take those out, and you can get this up just enough to where you can get some solder wick underneath and get the IC extracted and get the new one put in. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'll pick back up with you and let you know what my findings are. And then from that point, we'll move on to the lamps. And then ultimately, I want to get to the testing, make sure playback and record and all that's okay. So I'll start on this and then I'll pick back up with you when I'm done. All right, as we come back in, I went ahead and got the IC installed in the unit, and here is where we're at. I'll turn on power. And the first thing we notice right off the get-go is we have no lights lit. The unit is not sitting in pause mode. It is in the stop position. And I also, just for the moment, I removed that LED and tacked in one of the incandescents, so all of the lights are present, all the incandescents are present, and here's what we're going to do. This is one of the shorting pads from the button assembly over here. We don't want to put all this back together until I have all the lamps changed, but we'll start off with the one that worked before we did any of this, which is fast forward. And we're good. It's doing its thing. We'll go ahead and stop that. Okay, and now let's go to play. And now we're in play. And I have his interlock switch defeated right now just so we can run it without a tape in it. And everything is good to go. And now we're going to go over to the far one and hit pause. And now the unit is in pause. No trouble whatsoever. This is the way it's supposed to be. And then we go back to play. And we're good to go. And then stop. And then just for good measure, let's go to rewind. This will give us a first look at the new light, see what it looks like. It's looking real good there. And then stop. So it looks like we were able to get past the issue with the key controller IC. I only had to use one of these right off of the top, but I can assure you if I would have only ordered one, the one that I got would have probably been bad and we'd have been waiting another month. So we wanted to bypass that. This is the old one that came out of the unit, and this was the final LED that he had left in there. I'd originally had him change all those back out to incandescent lamps, thinking maybe there might have been something going on there. So not sure what happened in his process of doing this, but we're going to go ahead and get the lamps replaced and get the button assembly put back together, get it back in the front of the unit, and start the reassembly process. And I'll try to take you along for the ride on doing some of the solder work on the bulbs. I would have took you along for the solder job on the IC, but it's in a really cramped space. And unfortunately, I'm operating at kind of a deficit, and here's the reason. This is my magnifier lamp, and I have attached a basically a tripod piece here for my camera, so when I'm doing overhead shots. But that had came loose a little bit, so I removed the lamp out of this, and I was going to get ready to tighten this up, and the lens assembly, glass magnifying lens, fell out. I didn't catch it. I flipped the thing over and it fell out, hit the floor, and of course this is concrete. It's shattered into about 30 pieces. And so I've been operating without the magnifying lens in this thing. And so that makes it a little bit of a longer of a process to try to do it that way, because you know, when I don't have the piece that I'm trying to solder on magnified, then it becomes a situation of where I do one pin at a time and then look at it under magnification to make sure I've got it. So I've been at a little bit of a deficit. I did find one on eBay, so it should be here in a day or two, and I can get my magnifier put back together. But as far as this is concerned, I think we're good to go. I'm going to try to get you set up overhead and show you my process here that I'm going to use to replace these lamps, and we'll get all this put back together and start getting on the road to getting this thing to the point where we can get a tape on it. So give me a moment for that and I'll pick back up with you. All right, so we'll come back in here as we start the process of putting the lamps back in here. No real rocket science involved. I cleaned these pads up as best as I could. I didn't want to go too crazy with a Q-tip here. These are pretty frail. He had broken one off over here on this side, and let's see if I can get you over there. And I put this one in temporarily when I was testing it. This is going to be taken back out. I'm going to go ahead and attach the wire from the back like he did, because I don't think it's really possible to do it from the front. It would be too thick and this wouldn't fit flush on the button assembly. But the point I was trying to make is the pads here are really frail, so you got to be really careful. So we'll go back over here where we're doing this one. And again, no real rocket science. I just use this small little tool here to kind of judge distance-wise, because you want all these lamps to be the same distance, so one's not brighter in one button than the other is. And not only that, but you don't want to push them too far up inside this button assembly right here. If you push them too far up inside this button assembly, then you're going to have a problem. When you push the button in, it's going to crunch into the lamp, so you don't want that either. So my method for doing this is really not anything special. I'll go ahead and put the lamp in. And then I'm just going to kind of gauge it and get an idea where we're at here. Maybe just push it just a little further. That should be just about right. If it's off a tad bit, it's not going to be a big deal, but you don't want that thing to be off too far. And I'll go ahead and do just one trace on it, or one lead. And once I have the one lead done, then I can kind of judge how close they really are. I don't know, they look pretty damn close to me. But again, I'm not looking through my magnifier, but that looks pretty good to me. And of course, you trim off the leads on the back, and I'll do the same thing here. But yeah, that looks pretty good. So I'll just go down the line here and do all of these the exact same way. And it'll have brand new fresh lamps, which I can assure you will probably exceed the life of the recorder. They put 24 volt lamps in here. The voltage applied to them is only 20 volts, so I would think these lamps would last a very, very long time. So I'll finish up, and then I'll pick back up with you once I have it all put back together, and we'll try it once more. All right, so I'm picking back up with you. This is going to be day number 2, and I went ahead and let this set up overnight. After I got all the bulbs installed, I went ahead and changed out his jumper wire there to a little different one. Went ahead and secured it to the board with some glue, which also helps stabilize the one lead on the lamp. Obviously, since there's no trace there, need a little something to help keep that wire in place, and this worked out just fine. We'll run through these real quick just to make sure everything is still doing what it's supposed to be doing. Fast forward. Play. Rewind. And we'll simultaneously see if I can do this. We'll do record and pause. And then of course, all we would need to do is just hit pause, play here. And it'll go right into record, no trouble. Everything's working real good. I did notice that the play button is just a little dimmer than the rest. This doesn't have anything to do with the lamps that were put in. They're all perfectly brand new and perfectly the same. But my theory here is basically the same as a lot of those vintage receivers that have sleeves over the incandescent lights that change them to a different color, basically over time. Play is the one that's going to be on pretty much as long as you're using the unit in play. And so it runs the longest, and so over time, I believe the heat will just kind of give that kind of a little baked-in look, and so that would be my theory on that, but absolutely no issue with any of the lamps. Everything's working good. So I think at this point, I'm going to go ahead and put this switch assembly back in the front and go ahead and get the front of the unit back on it, and we can move on to some testing. Everything in the mechanism here, I've already checked, made sure all of his solenoids, everything's free. There's no issue with any of that. So we can go ahead and get this, start getting this put back together. So give me a few minutes for that, and then I'll pick back up with you. All right, so I'm picking back up with you now. Went ahead and got the front of the unit reassembled, got everything kind of put back into place. Doing our initial test here using our favorite mix tape. Everything's sounding pretty good. Don't have it routed over to the mixer yet. We're just doing our quick test on the bench receiver speakers. Let's check it out. Very nice old sounding tape deck. Plays very clean. And I'm sure that once we make it to the record test, we probably have a nice clean recording with this as well. There's a couple of things we need to do prior to that. The customer expressed some interest in having me double check the speed to make sure the speed was okay. So we'll load up the speed alignment tape, check that. And he also said that he thought he had an issue with the reel hub being too close to the front panel because he had some scarring on the front panel. So we're going to take a look at that as well. I had initially looked at that last night when I was reassembling everything, and I didn't see anything at that point, but looking at it today, I think the supply side might need to be pushed out just a little bit. So we'll take a little closer look at that. But first we'll come back, get the speed alignment tape loaded up and take a look at the speed. But it's sounding very good. All right, so as we come back in, let's take a look at his speed. I went ahead and loaded up the alignment tape here. And we're on the slow speed. And we need 500 hertz, and we have 501. So I am saying definitely qualifies for what the manual calls for. And so we're gonna leave that as is. But when we go over to the fast speed, there is an issue here. We're going a little too slow, so we need to tweak that up, and I'm going to try to do that on the fly. The manual lays this out beautifully, how to do it, and location of the pots that you need to adjust. Of course, you'll want to make sure you have the appropriate tape to do this with. So let's tweak it up a little bit here. All right, we'll wait for the tape to start again. And there it is, right on the money. This little fluctuation between 1,000 and 1,001, totally fine. We'll leave that alone. That looks real good. So I think we're good on speed, no trouble whatsoever with that. So at this point, I'm going to take a look at this reel situation again. I've already looked at this once. I don't think there's an issue with it, but I'll take a look at it again. If you have a warped reel, sometimes a warped reel will scrape on this too, so you have to be careful with that. But otherwise, I think it looks all right. So I think at this point, we got his speed looking real good here, so we're going to go ahead and move on to our final record test with this. All right, so let's pick back up. Let's do a record test with the Akai GX-620. Went ahead and got everything put back together. I've already done enough playback and record testing with the unit myself to be satisfied that everything is working as well as it should be. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by the record quality of this. But yet Akai is known for their reel-to-reel tape decks, among other things, I would suppose, but in particular reel-to-reel and the amazing sound that these things can produce. When we started part 2 of this video, we were checking out some of Jeff Tate's work under the Operation Mindcrime name. And that actually got me thinking about the album Operation Mindcrime, but not the original one, but the part 2 version that they released, I think around 2005, 2006. At that time, they were trying to recapture lightning in a bottle for the second time. Unfortunately, it didn't quite pan out that way. But there was some things here that kind of caught my attention. I bought the album and I do have it, but of course, nothing was going to be able to compare to the original, and this one certainly didn't compare to the original, to be quite honest with you about it. But there was a couple of songs that caught my attention, and one is called The Hands. So I thought we would load that one up and record that one. So let's go ahead and put the machine into record pause and reset our counter. And let's go ahead and start it up here.
When I'm lost, I find a way. I hear voices. Feel them surround me, pull me from the edge. I close my eyes and my luck is always strong, even when that boot comes down. Waiting for the revolution, but there's no one around except the hands out of nowhere, saving me again. There's always something there watching out for me. If I'm suffocating, it gives me air.
All right, let's go ahead and switch it over at this point into the tape mode. Right now, of course, we're into source monitoring. That way we can get a real-time idea of what our tape quality sounds like.
Anymore. I'm looking for you. Can you imagine? You can't think. Can you imagine? You won't find a way this time without me. Yeah. You're unescaped. Can you imagine? Always looking over your shoulder for a place where you don't see my face. But my luck is always so strong, even with the state I'm in. I'm like a revolution born, even when I stumble, I win. Except the hands out of nowhere, saving me again. There's always something there watching out for me. If I'm suffocating, it gives me air. I'm like a cat with only a few lives left and running from the shadows.
Well, as you can see from that recording, this machine absolutely pretty much right on the money when it comes to recording. Assuming that you have a good tape, you shouldn't have any trouble with this machine making any kind of recordings. So I think from this point, we'll go ahead and get things wrapped up. Give me a second and I'll pick back up with you and we'll close it out. All right, so as we come back in, we're going to take a final look at the Akai GX-620 Reel-to-Reel. Also want to thank you guys. I appreciate you checking out the video this week. Also, thanks to Franz. Appreciate you sending this up here to me to get fixed. I'm sure you'll be welcoming this back to your collection down in Florida. And also to all the other guys that have reached out to me about working on units. Appreciate you taking the time to inquire about that. And I know next week's project is going to be a older Pioneer car cassette unit that was sent from Oklahoma. So unless something else comes up, I believe that's going to be next week's video. and I'm still in the process of finishing up the hi-fi, JVC hi-fi VCR for George, and I'm going to make a short clip of that. I'm almost got it taken care of, so we also have that coming up. So on the way out, let's go ahead and have one last listen to the Akai